I want to talk to you today then in this session about your roadmap to a more successful practice. Let me ask you a question though to start with, and I'd like to raise your hand if you are a procrastinator. Okay, so maybe about a third of the room put their hand up there. That's fantastic. That's great. And obviously the 2/3 of the room haven't got round to raising your hand yet. Because actually, it turns out that we're all procrastinators. The incredibly wealthy, multimillionaire entrepreneurs are self-confessed procrastinators. The billionaire magnates are self-confessed procrastinators. We all have a tendency to procrastinate in one way or another. It doesn't necessarily have to be within business, does it? You know, it could be doing the gardening. It could be doing exercise. It could be DIY, decorating. I'm just listing my challenges here. Or of course, it could be around implementing stuff within the business. But what the difference really there is that different people have got different mechanisms in place. They recognise this natural tendency to procrastinate, and they put mechanisms in place to overcome that challenge. And, you know, for the reasons I said earlier, and there's even more reasons here, you know, I think I mentioned earlier, Ron Baker reviewed this book about the end of the end of accounting, and the relevancy of our core services that accountants offer now. That and all of the rest of the reasons I mentioned earlier are reason enough to start to take some action and maybe put some mechanisms in place to overcome this natural tendency that we all have to procrastinate. So what I'd like to do in this session is share with you some insights, some personal insights in terms of mechanisms that you can apply to overcome some of those procrastination tendencies. And, you know, for the few people in the room that maybe don't procrastinate as much, you've got great mechanisms in place to overcome those urges, maybe it's something that you can apply with your team, maybe it's something you can take with your clients, because everybody needs some help, really, in putting some of these mechanisms in place to overcome that natural tendency. As I said earlier, really, and it's not rocket science, we've been saying it for 18 years now, you know, the natural evolution I see for accountants is to become the business growth advisor. And I know that many of you will be thinking, well, you know, there are other great coaches out there. Yes, there are other great coaches out there. There are lots of people who wear this hat as being a business coach, who've maybe been in business for who knows how long. Maybe they've had their own business, maybe they've had a few other businesses. But I mentioned earlier about the rapid change that's happening around us. How out of date a set of accounts is just from the previous year, yet alone somebody who might have been in business and retired 5 years ago and decided to be a coach. You know, you as accountants are in business now. You as accountants are dealing with people in businesses now. You hear about the different challenges that are going on. Your clients open up to you and tell you about all of the things that's happening to them. They trust you. You're in a much better position than those business coaches, business consultants, business mentors out there than anybody else. And you've got your skills with numbers to really make a difference to them. So my next few slides, I'm going to share with you some of my observations, some of the things that I've experienced when I'm visiting members in their practice, some of the things that I see are going on, and then I'm going to share with you some of the mechanisms I put in place to help me overcome some of those challenges, mechanisms I've seen others, and also how I think AVN can maybe change the way it supports you to help you overcome them as well. One of the first ones is this feeling of being overwhelmed. And I'm sure many of you can relate to the fact that, you know, you've got an office to run, haven't you? The phone rings, clients. We've got emails that are ping, ping, ping all day long that we have to keep dealing with. And then, of course, we've got the day-to-day operational stuff, whether it's processing accounts, whether it's reviewing accounts, whatever it is that's the normal day-to-day stuff, yet alone all this AVN stuff, when have I got time for that? So feeling overwhelmed is one of the biggest challenges that leads to procrastinating over doing some of the more important stuff. A feeling of confusion. Steve's talked about AVN Excellence a few times, but actually AVN Excellence in its current structure isn't structured in a logical, chronological order of applying stuff, is it? So where do you start and what do you do next? Perfectionism. I apologise. Being a perfectionist can be a real challenge to actually just implementing anything, because a perfectionist wants to go to the nth degree to get everything right before they release it. I was talking to, there's a chap in this room, I shan't name him, but he was telling me recently that, you know, he's been working on his vision document for 5 years now, but he doesn't want to release it until it's perfect. And he knows that that's not the right thing to do, but it's a built-in tendency, isn't it, to be a perfectionist, to want everything to be right. In this day and age, with the speed that everything moves at, just past good enough is too late. Another cause, of course, is fear, isn't it? And there can be lots of things that we fear. Fear of rejection, for example. What if they say no when I put this to them? What if they turn it down? Fear of failure. For many people, fear of failure is something that really drives them to get the results. But for other people, it can stop them making any changes whatsoever, for fear that it may go wrong. What if I make a mess of it? What if it goes wrong? Fear of conflict. What if somebody asks me a question, I can't answer it, will they get annoyed with me? What if they complain? Of course, there's a fear of insecurity, isn't there? You know, I've got a lot riding on this. It could all fall out, or get a bit of words out. You know, it could all go pear-shaped, couldn't it? Got a lot to lose. There's even the fear of success. What if I actually sell a total accounting solution package? The hell will I do then? So fear is obviously a big reason why we procrastinate over stuff. For other people out there, you know, quite often we're driven away from pain, aren't we, towards gain. That tends to be one of the most common drivers. We look for what's the pain, what's the gain, and encourage people along that journey. But I often find that accountants are still sat in a comfortable position. It's not that comfortable. They're working lots of hours. They're getting very little reward for it, but they've kind of got used to it. So there's not enough pain necessary to drive them. But I ask you, you know, what are you doing with your clients that the competitor down the road can't do? What is it that's setting you apart from the competitors? What's going to stop your clients going and getting 3 quotes from other accountants at the next year end before deciding to continue to work with you? What are you offering that's different? Of course, there's the other side of that, the bright, shiny stuff. We all like to jump on these bandwagons, don't we? This looks good, and we butterfly from one thing to another without actually permanently implementing any of those changes in the practice. And then we've got this challenge where actually when somebody started working with us especially, you know, they might have been working long hours, getting little reward, not really taking any relaxing holidays, and we've helped them go through this change curve. Things tend to get worse before they get better when we're going through change, don't they? And they've gone to the next level. And things are better now than they used to be. Maybe they're only working 50 hours a week instead of the 70 they were before. But actually, there's a whole other level that they could aspire towards, but they don't, because it's the thought of going through this journey again is too daunting. So they're my observations in terms of, you know, what are the most common causes, if you like, for procrastination. And with those things in mind, I was thinking, well, what is it that people are buying really from AVN? Is it a life? Is it more time? Is it enjoyment? Is it better income? Is it a roadmap? Is it direction? It's all of these things really, isn't it? And with that in mind, I'm going to share with you now some of the mechanisms that I personally use to overcome some of my procrastination tendencies. I'm well aware of my shortcomings, and I put a number of mechanisms in place to help me keep moving, keep progressing. And so hopefully you'll get some value from that. But also, we've significantly changed some of the ways that we help AVN members to implement the changes needed in their practice as well. I will share that with you. We often use this sort of saying, don't we, this mantra, practice makes perfect. But actually Laura, a few months ago, shared with me an alternate version to that their school uses, which is actually practice makes progress. And I think that's a much better one, isn't it? Because actually, we'll never achieve perfection. So it doesn't matter how many times you practice it behind the scenes or whatever, get out there and do it, because every single time you do it, you're going to get better anyway. And you can almost use that as a headline for yourselves as well, couldn't you? So let's look at the fear one again. Notice that everything I said around the rejection, the failure and all of that, well, they were what ifs, weren't they? What if this? What if that? What if this? I used to think that fear stood for forget everything and run. But apparently it doesn't. It's false evidence appearing real. All the stuff that goes on in our head, what if this, what if that, what if this, what if that, we start to actually think that they will happen, and therefore we put it off. Because we don't know how to cope if those things happened. Let me ask you a different question. If you as AVN members, you've got all of the resources that you need to make stuff happen. If you had all of the kit given you to jump out of an aeroplane, if you've got a parachute, the helmet, whatever else you need, would you, having never done it before, get in an aeroplane, get up there, door opens, jump out, just pull the cord, mate, that's all you need to do? Would you do it? No, I suspect that in that plane you'd be thinking, what if it doesn't open? What if, wouldn't you? That's probably fair to say. Well, I did it. For many years I'd hinted to Jenny, my wife, that I would like to do a parachute jump for my 40th birthday. Now, Jenny being of a fairly cautious nature, she's there, I wonder where she was, thought she would book me the safer option, which was one of those big indoor sort of cylinder things over the fan, you know, where you can free fall over it. It was a great experience, but it wasn't a parachute jump. So for my 41st birthday, she relented and booked me a proper parachute jump. And me being me, I wasn't going to do one of these tandem things where I'm hooked to somebody else and they're doing all the work. If I'm going to jump out of an aeroplane, it's going to be me doing it alone. And so part of booking the parachute jump was that it had to be 2 days of training. So 2 days of training, that sounds a lot, doesn't it? And that training consisted of how to jump out of the aeroplane. Well, that's that bit over. The next bit was the position you get into. That's that bit over. And the next bit was landing. Okay, so what was the rest of the training about? What if? What if this happened? What if that happened? And this is what you need to do. So, for example, one of the things that could happen is that you jump out, you deploy the chute, and it doesn't open because it's twisted. And there are various other things as well that might go wrong. And so I spent those 2 days in real sort of role play type situations where I'm hanging from the ceiling and I'm looking up to a picture and it looks like that and various other scenarios, and we're being taught exactly what to do if that happens. And this wasn't somebody stood at the front saying, by the way, if this happens, just do this. You were actually doing it yourself. You were involved in the process so that it became second nature. And if that happens, what you need to do is grab it and you're flicking your legs and you're twisting around until the wires have untangled. So anyway, I'm sat in the airplane and I'm going up, and I get out and obviously I've jumped, and you're supposed to count 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, check canopy. Is it big? No, because it looked like that. But I didn't swear, I didn't panic, I looked up, I said the words that they drill into you so you can do all of these checks. It looked like that, and I just did exactly what I needed to do. And I came down, and I landed, and I ran around and said, can I do it again? So fear is largely based on the stuff that we don't know how to cope with if it goes wrong. It's all of those what-ifs, isn't it? Now, don't get me wrong, this guy was crapping himself. You can see it on his face there. Makes me laugh just thinking about how much he was crapping himself. But anyway, that's the point, really, isn't it? You know, if you're figuring out how to implement something, you need to get the training that we provide at AVN. Get trained, gain the confidence, test out scenarios. If you've got what ifs, bring them with you. What if they say this? Because we can get somebody that acts like that, and you can learn to overcome those situations. So one of the things that we're shifting from is that, you know, I mean, we don't do it with all of the events, but sometimes we do, is this one-way monologue. And actually move to more of a workshop where there's role play, there's working stuff out for yourself, because, you know, with AVN Excellence, it's not about creating a clone of franchise, is it? It's about the stuff that's pertinent to what you want to build, but actually more hands-on helping you achieve those things. Fear's also your friend, believe it or not. And who better to put a great example as to why fear is your friend forward than J.K. Rowling. If you haven't watched this, by the way, this is an amazing YouTube video to watch. She's conducting a commencement speech for Harvard graduates. I'm only playing the first 30 seconds of it, but I highly recommend you watch it because she talks through her journey of hitting rock bottom, going through all the failures that she's gone through, and if it hadn't been for those, she would never have written those books. So it's something I highly recommend watching, and you know, you can find it very easily just by typing Rowling and graduate. So, anyway, why fear is your friend?
The first thing I would like to say is thank you. Not only has Harvard given me an extraordinary honour, but the weeks of fear and nausea I have endured at the thought of giving this commencement address have made me lose weight. A win-win situation. Now all I have to do is take deep breaths, squint at the red banners, and convince myself that I am at the world's largest Gryffindor reunion.
See, fear is your friend. It can help you lose weight. Who's got a big should-do list? I've always got stuff on my should-do list. Jenny keeps adding to it. But one of the things that was on my should-do list for years was actually just doing more exercise. Well, it's not work-related, but it was doing more exercise. And I'll be honest with you, and many of you know the types of things I get involved in. I get no enjoyment whatsoever out of doing exercise, even now. I know I need to do it, and it was on my should-do list for a very long time. But I didn't really get any enjoyment out of it. And I think quite often, and hopefully you'll relate to this, that sometimes we think, do you know what, I really ought to do this, but the timing for doing it isn't necessarily right. So our readiness to commit is probably quite high, but at a bad time. And then when actually the opportunity does present itself, like if it's a nice day, I can't be arsed. You know what I mean? And quite often the timing's not right. So one thing I do, one mechanism I do, is commit myself. And I don't mean to the asylum, but commit myself. So when I've just stuffed myself silly after eating my dinner, and I'm sat there feeling very positive, and I really ought to get some exercise done, I'll just go online and book something like this, because I know that I don't want to fail. I will do whatever exercise is needed in order to achieve them. And it started off, many of you may remember me standing at a conference in 2012 talking about the Ironman I was training for at the time. So I started booking an annual Ironman. The challenge with that is I did exercise for 3 months a year just leading up to it. So now I have to book as many of these things as possible, so I'm doing something every single month, otherwise I won't get out there and do the exercise. I'll procrastinate over it. As I say, I know my shortcomings, but this is a way that I will force myself out to do the exercise. So you can do that too, can't you? You can commit yourself to having the kind of conversations with your clients that maybe you've been putting off. You know, you're all set to do it and then the meeting starts and then you bottle it. By sending a letter out to them in advance and saying, you know, at our next meeting, I'd love to talk to you about this. Commit yourself. Send out the agenda. And On Track, by the way, produces both of those things for you. Get consent to test as well. I'm sure you've got clients that if you want just to either put in the email or pick up the phone and just say, I'd like to run some stuff by you. I know you'll get value out of it, but I'm not really sure I'm going to be able to present it very well. Would you mind being my guinea pig? I'm making this up, by the way. There's a nice scripting system that you can use. But do you know what I mean? And just say, you know, I'm asking you because I know you're a little bit more forgiving and maybe open-minded to this before I run it by other clients. Would you be kind enough to let me test this stuff on you? And that's all you have to say. Get consent to try stuff with people and be very much open to it. And I appreciate that maybe some people in the room don't have this willingness to commit to something maybe as frequently. I know that some of you, maybe it's a little less often. And if that's the case, I have a mechanism for that as well. I mentioned earlier, I'm privileged to work with a fantastic team of people. And that fantastic team of people recognise my shortcomings big time. And they know when I'm putting something off. And a recent example, actually, I've pretty much said all year, I'm going to start running some road shows for, you know, going to different places in the UK, running some kind of breakfast presentation for accountants in the local area, just talking through the threats that I've just mentioned and the possibilities going forward with a view to basically pitching AVN. Been saying that for months. So Laura said, right, you're booked, it's done, you're doing it. When that happens, I kind of go through a few stages of thought process. Starting with, oh dear. And then I think, how can I get out of this? There's got to be a way. People are coming, they're expecting me speaking, so how can I get out of this? Maybe if I jump in front of a car, I could get hospitalised. That's an extenuating circumstance, isn't it? I think people will be forgiven around that. You kind of think, well, slight risk of death. So maybe I'll abandon that idea. But actually, once you realise that you can't get out of it, your brain starts to get in gear. And you start thinking about how you can do it. And as the deadline approaches, because you know you can't get out of it, something else happens. It's called Parkinson's law. And this is the brain's ability to throw every single ounce of its own energy at making sure something happens, because you can't get out of this deadline that's been set. If it's a self-imposed, I'll just make it happen by then, you can easily change it, can't you? If it's something that you absolutely can't get out of doing, Your brain just throws everything at it and you will make it happen. Graduates can relate to that. They've managed to get the thesis in the 48 hours leading up to the deadline when they've had a very long time to do it. So my recommendation to you is do exactly that. Appoint a champion in your practice, someone who's not going to feel all the fear about committing you to doing something. Yeah, put your life in their hands. But you've got to give them permission to commit you and not bother them when they have done. And, you know, they can do a number of things. Maybe they can just produce an accounts pack for you that just includes a benchmark report, an on-track report with the action plan in there. And if they've sent the agenda out, or the, you know, the letter, is Mike Ogilvie in? I don't think I've seen him. No, okay. I was reminded when I put this together, actually, Mike Ogilvie told me a story when he just shortly after starting AVN, and he's been with us for a very long time, that this happened to him. The client manager that he'd appointed for this particular client, he was on the train going to see a client, and basically got this accounts pack in his hand, and he decided to open it up just to refresh his memory on the accounts. And the first thing he saw was a benchmark report, followed by an on-track report, and a copy of the letter that had been sent to the client saying, I'm going to be talking to you about all these things. And he went, oops, sorry. His heart basically did that. But he read through the stuff. There's a for your eyes only document, isn't there, in On Track? He read through all that lot. He had absolutely no choice. And what he said to me, that it was one of the best meetings he'd ever had. Sometimes it's all up here, isn't it? You could get them to take it to the next level, couldn't you? Maybe your champion will come and say, right, I booked a venue. I've invited all the clients and prospects, sat in 2 weeks. Good luck, you're in a BDF. So that's another option. And I'm sure we're all familiar with, John F. Kennedy doing exactly that, didn't he? He set a goal. Do you know that NASA had no idea he was going to say that? So NASA presumably saw it on TV just as everybody else did. So their thought process was probably something along the lines of, oh dear. Followed by, how can we get out of this? And so they phoned up the White House and said, you've got to retract that statement. It is absolutely impossible. We cannot do that. And they said, no, you're doing it. So of course, their brains had to get in gear. And they started to think about how they could do it. And then, as the deadline, of course, he said before the decade's out, kind of meant 1969, he made the announcement in 1961. Parkinson's law kicked in, and in 1969, not 8 or 7, but in 1969, they achieved that mission. Setting deadlines is incredibly powerful. Getting somebody else to commit you is also incredibly powerful. If you can't do that yourself, you can't bring yourself to do it yourself. It's a great mechanism. So are you putting something off that you know you should be doing? What could you do? What action could you take to make sure that you do it? I mentioned earlier this feeling of overwhelm. But there's a massive difference actually between feeling overwhelmed and being overwhelmed. We've all got a mountain of things that we should be doing, could be doing. But actually the way that we organise that information, that to-do list, can make a massive difference to us as well. So how we structure our day and how we prioritise and how we store that information can make a massive difference to the way that we feel. If I were to plot a route between London and Leeds, it would put me on the M1, and that's 184 miles. Apparently it would take 3 hours and 20 minutes. I'm sure some of you might argue that if you just come down the motorway, but assuming there's no traffic, I'd be cruising along at 70 miles an hour in 5th gear, and hopefully I'd get there in 3 hours and 20 minutes, wouldn't I? What if every 100 or 200 yards, though, there was a set of traffic lights on red? I'd never get into 5th gear, would I? I'd been first and I'd set off, and no sooner did I want to change gear that I'd have to stop again and start the whole process. So it'd take me a very long time, wouldn't it, to get all the way to Leeds with that happening. But actually, our brains do something very similar. Our brains go through a series of gears when we're working on something. As long as we're working on something in an uninterrupted fashion, where we can give 100% concentration to something. So 11 minutes, unlike a car, 11 minutes is how long it takes for the brain, if it's uninterrupted and allowed to focus on something, it can take 11 minutes before it'll step into that next gear. And then over the next 20 minutes, it'll move progressively up. You're not consciously aware of this, but actually your brain is functioning much more faster. And you're producing more, your productivity goes up through the roof. But just like that set of traffic lights makes the car stop and go back into first gear again, it can take an interruption of just 2.5 seconds for that to reset back to the beginning again, and you've got to go through those 11 minutes before you start to up the pace. How many interruptions do you get in a day? Just having a team of people in a 21st century style office, research shows that even with just 4 people, we can get 14 interruptions an hour. 14, there's no way that 11 minutes gets a chance to even, it doesn't get a chance to go beyond that, does it? And obviously that goes up depending on the number of people. So in the office, we've got the typical office environment. We've got the phone that rings, whether it's clients or prospects or whatever. And of course, when the phone rings and it's a client on the phone, we feel compelled to answer that and take that call, don't we? Unless we're in a meeting. If we're in a meeting with a client, we're quite happy for somebody to say, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you right now. Maybe they'll get back to you between 12 and 2, for example. So why don't you put a mechanism in place that you're never available between, say, 10 and 12? That's your quality time. And the standard response to your clients, your prospects, whoever answers the phone can just say, I'm sorry, he or she's in a meeting right now. They'll be available between 12 and 2. Can we call you back then? Likewise, in the afternoon, you can do something similar. So you've got a couple of hours of absolute quality time to get stuff done. Because you'll get a day's worth of stuff done in 2 hours if you do that. Likewise, emails. Ping, ping, ping. The average person checks their email 36 times an hour. And I know that many of you think, well, you know, if I don't respond to my client straight away, they'll wonder what's going on. But actually, if there was an automatic response, either by a human being or by the computer that said, I only check my emails between these times, or I'm unavailable until 12, I'll get back to you after then, people will be all right with that, because they've had some kind of acknowledgement. And that gives you the opportunity to get more of your operational stuff done and out of the way, and you can focus on more of the AVN stuff that we're always talking about, that you should be doing. Prioritisation. I mentioned earlier, actually, when I was asked about the PMI in the cloud. I mentioned that I was using a lot of these cloud-based tools. Now, I'm a great advocate of technology. But for me, having this stuff out in the cloud, I'd have to kind of remember to go and look for it. And that doesn't work for me. So what I find incredibly useful is, every now and again, if I'm starting to feel overwhelmed, is I'll just get a big pile of post-it notes and I'll write down absolutely everything that I know I need to get on with. And that's basically a photograph of the wall behind me in the office. And what that basically is the 4 quadrants, the Stephen Covey's 4 quadrants. Just as relevant today, and as far as I'm concerned, always will be. You know, your important and urgent stuff, they're your fires, but how many times do you put the fires out without actually spending some time finding out what's causing those fires? What can I do to stop the things happening in the first place? And that side of it's usually your quadrant 2, isn't it? The stuff that actually always gets put off, but it's the stuff that's going to have the biggest impact on your business. Going through this process allows you to weigh up, is this really important and urgent? Is it just important, or is it just urgent? And if it's just urgent, they're the easy ones to delegate. I'm not suggesting you should only delegate the urgent and not important, but they're certainly the easy ones, aren't they? And of course, if it's not urgent or important, you shouldn't even be doing it. I've been meaning for a long time to write my own book. It never seemed to be time. And somebody said to me a while back, that's not the finished cover, by the way, that's just something I mocked up because I'm waiting for the design. Somebody said to me a while back, if this is important enough, you need to make it out. Why don't you get up out of bed an hour earlier every day and set yourself a target of working on it for that 1 hour every single day? And if you set yourself a challenge of writing 1,000 words in that hour, a typical business book's about 30,000 words, which means in a month you'll have that done. So I did that, and it's done, and it's with the editors now. But by putting that process in place, I've made it happen. Just a little bit every single day. I talked earlier about the perfectionist. And in my opinion, the best way to tackle this is, number one, to recognise that you are a perfectionist and you will have this tendency to not want to let something go until you're 100% happy with it, which will never happen. And the best way to do that is to set yourself a deadline that you can't get out of. So come this deadline, whatever condition it's in, it's got to go out there, because that will help you prioritise and make sure it's good enough. And set some accountability that kind of relates to you can't get out of this deadline. If you just set yourself a date on there, you'll just postpone it, postpone it, postpone it. If you've got to present it to somebody, or a room full of people, or whatever it might be, then you've less chance of getting out of it. Bill Gates confessed in his biography that he knew that most of the versions of Windows that went out were full of bugs. But if he didn't get them out there full of bugs, someone else would get it out there first. So the other one's confusion. Now, today you'll all be writing some actions, won't you, to take away. Let's just have a look at obviously a fictitious action plan. Take dog to vets. Now, assuming we know which dog and which vets, that's a fairly straightforward action, isn't it? We can look at that and think, right, I know exactly what to do. I can follow that pretty much robot fashion. So I can tick that one off. The next one is review blogging's plumbers' accounts. Again, this is something you've been doing for years. You can follow that action robot fashion. You're a meeting. Again, something you're familiar with doing. It's a plain, straightforward action, isn't it? Create one-page plan for practice. At this point, your eyes glaze over. You look at it for a few minutes. You're not really sure where to start. Fetch dog from vet. That is an easy action to implement because I know what I'm doing. And let's face it, 4 out of 5 actions ain't bad, is it? So we glazed over that because it's not an action. It's a project, and a project needs breaking down into actions. But quite often we combine the two, don't we? We'll fill out our action plan, and we'll write it down as if this is something we're just going to carry out robot fashion. Whereas something like that needs breaking down into what needs to happen, what do I need to consider, what are the steps I need to take, put those into some kind of logical order, and then carry them out as actions. Then they're robot fashion actions. And that's what you need to do for a lot of things. But who's got time for that? Some of you have made time, but actually you've got busy offices to run, haven't you? And it occurred to me when I was coming up with this that actually AVN Excellence, it's not 105 actions that can be implemented into your practice. It's 105 strategic objectives, each of which will have a massive impact on your practice. But actually there are a number of steps for every single one of those standards that really need working out and deciding what's the plan, what process are we going to use in order to implement and make that particular standard happen. And so what we've done over these past few weeks with that in mind is that we've taken a look and thought, well, where's the best place to start with AVN Excellence? Knowing what we know about accountants, their practices and where they're at. And so we've gone through this workbook and we've identified what we believe are the best starting points. And then we've gone through the 1,200 plus marginal gains, I'm using that now. But that's what they are, isn't it? The resources in System Builder, all those great ideas, are actually in themselves marginal gains. You implement this, it's going to have an impact on your practice. And those marginal gains that are in System Builder will all help you, if you implement each one of them, achieve AVN Excellence. Certainly achieve a better practice. So what we've done is we've plucked out the most relevant, the most helpful marginal gains from System Builder for each one of those standards that we believe is probably the best starting point. And we've put those together. And then each member of the team that deals with AVN members have put their own unique spin on some of those, have broken it down to more steps sometimes, have added something extra to it, and they've ultimately produced a roadmap. Not just one, but a series of them. In fact, the first roadmap that we've entitled Clarity, clarity in terms of where to start, clarity in terms of where to begin and get going, is tailored. So we've identified a number of places that would make a good starting point depending on where you're at with your practice right now. And so we will tailor that off the back of a needs analysis phone call and go through a series of recommendations and then tailor a starting point. Members have been asking us for years, can I have a roadmap? Where's the best place to start? So that's what we've pulled together. So we've got clarity. And again, that's ultimately about where to begin. And we've broken this down into little steps. That's not meant to sound condescending. This is all planned out for you. It saves you having to do it yourself. The next one's around positioning then. You know, I was talking to, I'm not naming, but I was talking to a member just a few minutes ago during lunch saying that, you know, he's unable to sell some of these services to the clients he works with. For me, a large part of that is down to positioning. They're saying, who are you to tell me how to get better sales in my business? It's down to positioning. So the second part of this roadmap is about helping you get better positioned as an expert so that actually they want you to help them with their business. So one of the things is about attaining the AVN member status, the accreditation, so that you can put that badge, if you like, on your website and call yourself an AVN member. The next one is about getting into the Business Owner's Guide to the UK's Best Accounting Practices, which I shall talk about a little bit more shortly. And the next one is about getting your own book. Who in the room, by the way, have got their own book that we've helped you produce? Okay, so not all of you. And help you basically present yourself as much more professional. Value then. So these are titles obviously, but value-driven growth. So ultimately it's helping you to grow and better cultivate your client base through value. The next one's gearing, leveraging your time. And that includes getting your team on board. Getting more out of your team, helping them make better decisions that fit your values and beliefs for your practice, so they're better representing that. And you're passing some of the onus that's usually on you to make this stuff happen to them. Automation. The aim there is for you to take relaxing holidays without taking your phone, your iPad, whatever it is, to check emails and take phone calls. How many in the room get to do that? Just a few hands. I wonder if it's that sort of 10 to 20% I mentioned earlier. Profile. The stuff that Shaz is doing is really raising his profile. He's recording these videos, he's getting them out there. He's Probably very high on social media as well. Yeah. All of those types of things really raise your profile in the eyes of your target market. So that's another series of things. And for every single one of these, by the way, we're running workshops as well that will really help you embrace this stuff and get to grips with it. Purposeful is what I call the last word rule. And that ultimately is about making a difference, being more purposeful, becoming that business growth advisor. And putting this together, it kind of reminded me, weirdly, of my first skiing holiday. That was also 11 years ago in 2005. A bunch of my friends who had been skiing for years invited me along. I'd never skied before. And again, me being me, turned up, set of skis that I'd hired, expecting just to figure it out, a bit of trial and error on a mountain. Now, if you've skied and you've ever stood on even a fraction of the way up on these mountains, it's pretty scary, isn't it? When you're on skis and you don't know how to control them. And, you know, I was basically getting it wrong. I looked like I was on roller skates on an ice rink. That's basically what I was like. And my friends kept saying, oh, you need to bend your knees and you need to put the weight on your toes and you need to bend your hips. And I'm sat like this and what the bloody hell? And you know, you're trying to think of all these different things that everybody's throwing at you. And in hindsight, I realised that actually all my friends that were giving me all this advice, because they were very good at skiing, had actually forgotten what it was like when you couldn't ski. So I finally relented to go in and get some training. So I went to the local ski school and they assessed me to figure out where I was. It wasn't a very good place. And they put me in basically the lowest group possible, but they put me in the start of the beginning group. And instead of focusing on all of these different things that my friends had been pointing out that I should be doing, I had about 3 or 4 things that I needed to focus on. Well, that made it easier. Just focusing on these few things. And not only that, I was with a group of other people at exactly the same level as me. So not only could I see what the instructor was saying, I could look to the person next to me and say, right, you look very different. Let me just, this is what you need to do. I can see it. So we were helping each other out because we all knew exactly what we needed to focus on. Now, as it happened, sounds a little bit big-headed, but I progressed a lot faster than the other people in the group because I've got these few things to focus on and I could do that. So rather than me then waiting for everybody to catch up, they moved me into the next group. And so I've got another few things to focus on. And I gradually got better and I focused on those few things and then I moved into the next group. And so I progressed at my rate. And by the end of the week I was skiing down the mountain and loving every single minute of it. So I was essentially in an environment where we were all learning, focused on the same few things together and progressing still at my pace. The advancement groups, which I launched back in 2012, the intention was to achieve something very similar. People on a similar journey would be talking about the same kind of things and everyone would progress together. But the reality has been very different. We wanted we wanted people to be focused on what are their goals. But the thing is, it turned out to be just an open forum. And lots of the discussions were mainly around operational, which is fair enough. People sometimes need to have those discussions. But because everyone were in different places, everyone wants to talk about something different, people were really experienced and really successful. So now you need to be doing this, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing this. But people come away confused, didn't know where to start. If you were to join a running club, they wouldn't stick the 7-minute milers together with the 10-minute milers, would they? They'd put you into something that was right for you, and if you progressed, you'd move into the next group. And so that's what we're going to do with these groups. I'm going to stop calling them advancement groups. Whether we'll still run a few of those for people who just want to get together and talk about operational stuff, that's fine. But we're going to complement those roadmaps with specific peer-to-peer groups as well, so that you're all in the same group as somebody else going through the same things, and you'll be talking about the same few actions together. So that roadmap to success looks like this. It starts with clarity and positioning. I've just run through these, so I'm just going to go through them quick. Value, gearing. They're the 7 stages in that AVN roadmap to success. Throughout the entire journey, there'll be different marginal gains that you can be adding to your practice that's going to make it bigger and stronger and better. We've got implementation workshops. So again, it's not just one way talking, it's going to be actually helping you achieve, think through, whatever it might be, some of the stuff that's in those workbooks. And there'll be mastermind groups for people who've gone through the other side as well. And then these different coloured boxes represent the peer groups that we'll be putting people in, and if you want to move to the next one because you've achieved that, then you can do. So everyone's still progressing at the same rate, and if somebody's still in one group where everybody else has left and you keep getting a new bunch of people, you need to be thinking, I probably need to take more action than I currently am. So that confusion in terms of where to start, I'd like to think will be overcome to a large extent. Because you're not drawn to what direction shall I take. You've got a step-by-step journey ahead of you, should you choose to take it. That feeling of, I've got to go through another dip now, I'd like to think that because we're making this journey easier, that they're not such big dips that you've got to go through, and hopefully people will want to keep progressing to a whole other level. The bright shiny stuff, well, yeah, we're always going to be drawn to them, but actually this might just help keep you on the straight and narrow. I said earlier, you're not necessarily feeling the pain, and therefore maybe you're not taking the action. Well, actually, if it's not a big, massive action, if it's not really outside of your comfort zone, if they're little steps, I'd like to think that people are just going to keep progressing and going through this journey. So I suppose just to summarise, they're the things I've put together in terms of helping overcome the procrastination that I see within the membership. Either get committed yourself, get a champion within your practice to do this stuff for you. Basically follow the roadmap. Okay, just to change subject slightly, I said I'd talk about that book. Many of you will have heard me talk about the Michelin story, how the Michelin Brothers basically came up with the idea of getting more and more people to want to buy a car or to drive out around France in order to basically get through more tyres. And they produced this book. And that book was produced, despite there only being 3,000 cars in France, they produced it 20,000 copies and gave them to people around France for free. And because this book contained listings of restaurants with a star rating that they'd subjectively given at the time, restaurants from around from around France were approaching them saying, "How can I get into your book?" The restaurants that had been given maybe 1 or 2 stars said, "How can I get to the next level?" I hate using that term now. And so over the years, Michelin started to put more and more standards in place because they didn't want this book to be really thick. They wanted the book to have just a select few people in there that really meant something. And so it encouraged the restaurant industry to really step up if they wanted to be in this book. And so that was my plan several years ago, and I'd been waiting for a critical mass to build up. Back in March, the strategic panel, made up of quite a few of the people in this room, said to me, well, why don't you introduce, rather than just waiting for all of the AVN Excellence firms, why don't you introduce another standard just below that, which we've identified the standards. We sent an email out to everybody inviting you. If you can put these standards in place, you can appear in this book. So this book that you've all now got a copy of, and only some of you feature in, is here. I've put the clicker down. And if it feels hot, by the way, I've just talked about that, if it feels hot at all, it's fresh off the press. We just had it delivered today. Some of you probably saw me cutting open the box. So talk about timing. You know that Parkinson's law? So I mentioned, you know, AVN excellence is one of the main factors to get into this book. And the roadmaps now are going to help you achieve those steps in a much easier way. That positioning, the second roadmap, will help you feature in the book as an AVN accountant. So the objectives behind this book, it's going to be an e-book ultimately. Yeah, we've printed some out so that you can all take a copy and have a look through, because ultimately this is going to be, just like the Michelin Brothers did, given for free to as many people as possible. That's our aim as well. So using Facebook ads and LinkedIn and various other mechanisms, we're going to be encouraging people to download this book. Now, I don't expect anyone to read it cover to cover and think, right, I'm going to go and work with an AVN accountant now. But we'll be capturing the leads of these people who download the book, which means we can start drip feeding to business owners out there the benefits of working with an AVN accountant, and encourage them to click on a link in that email to go find an accountant that's right for them, that fits their criteria. So ultimately, this is a golden carrot lead generation tool more than anything else. But in there, you know, its purpose is also about raising awareness as to the benefits of working with an AVN accountant over and above that of a traditional accountant. So that second workbook that I talked about, positioning, ultimately it's about helping you get into this book and create your own book. We're running a workshop around that on the 10th of November. Again, the outcomes are you get to, if you haven't already got the AVN member status, what are the standards that you need to get in place in order to accomplish that, to feature in the book. And, you know, the name of the course is about how to showcase your practice to prospective clients. How do you really, you'll read different representations of accountancy practices in here, and some are stronger than others. So we want to help you put the strongest case forward for why prospects might want to work with your practice. And that's one of the aims of this workshop. So you choose, you know, you can go for the bright shiny objects. You can implement this stuff yourself. Many of you in the room, like I said earlier, 20% have just made this happen anyway. You don't necessarily need the roadmaps. But if you want the extra help in terms of mapping out exactly where to start and what to do next, then the AVN roadmaps might just be what you need. Extra things as well that have come off the back of discussions with the panellists and various other ideas that we've had. I'm not going to list them all here right now, but we've talked about, and we talked about this many years ago, but it didn't really work then, going to make it work this time, an AVN buddy system as well. So pair you up with somebody else who's really made an impact in their business, somebody that's right for you, and they can give you that mentoring, that help and support to help you make the change in your practice. So that's something we'll be doing. Either Emma and or I will be running Mastermind Groups as well, which we'll invite. These will be physical get-togethers, independent of those online peer groups. AVN's Most Inspiring Accountants, that for me is a relabelling of, you may recall many years ago, we ran the £1 million summit. And people came away absolutely inspired and wanted to replicate some of the success that those 5 firms in the room did then. So I'm going to run another one next year, but I'm going to give it this label instead, so it fits Steve's book. And so we're going to invite, again, 5 of the most inspiring firms to come and sit and invite you to come along and to listen and maybe ask questions about what they've done. We've heard some great stories today, but we've had about 8 minutes each. Okay, and finally, we are running quite early now because the awards didn't necessarily go for as long as possible. I said that I would share with you a glimpse of Benchmark in the cloud, as seems to be the case the software that we've had developed has taken a little bit longer than we wanted it to be. It's due to be released soon to beta subscribers, and many of you have put your names forward to be a beta tester. These are just a few of the screenshots in there. Some of the benefits, though, of this new cloud-based software is that it works similar to the online version of Times Up, where you can just edit the templates and set those things up much better. You can, whatever the SIP code is that you've put the business in against, if you think there's an alternative one that it might be useful to benchmark them against, instead you can do that as well. So in fact there's quite a few different elements in there, isn't there? So much more added functionality. Right, okay, so we're a little ahead of schedule, which suggests that the coffee isn't necessarily there, but it looks like Steve wants to say.
Can I just jump up and say a couple of things about books, if I may? I'm not mic'd up, so I will shout. I talked about the book which I'm currently researching, which is The World's Best Accounting Practices, and that's looking at how accountants have made their firms more successful. The stories in there are the stories of what firms like you have done in your firms to make your firm more successful for you, to improve your work-life balance and your profits and so on.
Thank you. This book is very different. It's actually a different colour, fortunately, as well. My new one's going to be red, this one's yellow. Because this is, so my book is designed for an audience of accountants. This book, of course, is designed for an audience of prospective clients for you. The purpose of the two books are very, very different. And as Shane said, if you're not in the book at the moment, I guess that's because you didn't take action when you were invited to be in it. However, the fact that it's printed today really doesn't matter in the slightest. I think that's really just so that you can get a sense of what it's like. Because it will be essentially an e-book, you can be in the book as soon as you've done what it takes to get in the book. So the fact that you might not be in there today, so what, that just means you can be in it in a few weeks or a few months' time. It's there for you to make the very most of, and technology sometimes works and sometimes it doesn't. But I guess you can hear me anyway. I just want to draw the distinction between the two books and really encourage you to do what it takes to make sure that you're in the first digital version or the second digital version, or whenever it works for you, in a few days, in a few weeks, in a few months. This is just a printed copy so you can physically get a feel for it today. This is not the book in that sense. Does that make sense? Okay, fantastic. Thank you. That was it.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I meant to say all that.
Jane said to me, if I forget to say all of that, stand up. So I just
Right, okay, so it's another opportunity to visit the sponsors. We're running about 15 minutes early, so it gives you extra time to grab a coffee, a cup of tea, have a chat with some more of the sponsors, or maybe just have a decision, make a decision about what are the actions that you've written down today, which is going to be the most important action for you to take. And then after coffee, which is at 4 o'clock, I should be introducing our keynote speaker this afternoon, Richard McCann.
If he's here, Shay, if he's here at 1:45, can I suggest you start it an hour?
Yeah, that would be good.
That work for everybody, wouldn't it? So as long as he's here to do his keynote at 1:45, we'll call everybody back here. We'll get away earlier and do it.
Is there?
Fantastic.
Spot on. All right, thanks everybody.